A new bill in Congress could fundamentally change the way naturalized citizens can lose their citizenship. If you're a naturalized U.S. citizen, what you're about to hear may worry you. This is no longer about how you became a citizen, it's about what happens after. Stay with me, because this could affect millions of Americans. Welcome back to Entry Status USA, where we turn complex immigration news into information you can actually understand and use. Today, I'm talking about something that's creating a lot of anxiety in immigrant communities across the country: the Fraud Accountability Act. This bill was recently introduced in both the Senate and the House, and it would dramatically change how the government approaches taking away citizenship. Before we go deeper, take a breath. There's a big difference between a bill being introduced and a bill actually becoming law. I'm going to explain what this legislation proposes, the serious legal problems it has, and whether this is really something you should be losing sleep over. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss important updates that could affect your status or that of your loved ones. First, let's look at how denaturalization works right now, because you need this background to see why the new bill is so controversial. Under current law, the government can only take away U.S. citizenship for problems that relate to how the person got that citizenship in the first place. That usually happens in two situations. One, there was a legal or procedural error in the naturalization process, so the person was granted citizenship even though, under the law, they shouldn't have been. Two, and more commonly, the person committed fraud or made a material misrepresentation during the naturalization application. The key word is during. Everything is tied to conduct that happened before or while the person was becoming a citizen. Once you're naturalized, your actions as a citizen can lead to criminal charges like any other American, but they cannot be used as a basis to revoke your citizenship. If your citizenship was properly granted, it is supposed to be permanent. That's not random. It reflects a basic principle in U.S. law that citizenship is not conditional. You're either a citizen or you're not. There's no probation, no trial period for citizenship. If the government could easily revoke citizenship, you'd end up with two classes of Americans: those whose status is secure and those whose isn't. Now, what does the Fraud Accountability Act try to do? It basically flips this whole framework. First, it would allow denaturalization based on fraud committed after someone becomes a citizen, not fraud in getting citizenship, fraud committed later as a citizen. That changes denaturalization from a way to correct a wrongly granted citizenship into a penalty for criminal behavior by citizens. Second, the bill would move denaturalization out of civil court and into criminal court. Under the proposal, when someone is convicted of a qualifying fraud offense, the same criminal judge would be required to immediately start denaturalization proceedings. Losing citizenship would become part of the criminal sentence, not a separate civil case. Third, the language is mandatory. The bill says judges shall denaturalize someone who is convicted of fraud, not may, not after considering the facts. That means no judicial discretion, no room to look at individual circumstances. Conviction would automatically mean denaturalization. Fourth, the bill gets rid of the current $10,000 fraud threshold. Right now, for fraud to count as an aggravated felony for immigration purposes, it usually has to involve over $10,000. That line is there to separate serious fraud from minor cases. The new bill removes that completely. Any fraud amount could qualify. Fifth, the bill tries to apply deportability rules, which have always applied only to non-citizens, to naturalized citizens. It does that by first stripping citizenship and then treating the person like any other deportable immigrant. This is a big legal leap, because the idea of deporting a citizen goes against the basic structure of immigration law. Finally, the bill would apply retroactively back to September 30th, 1996. Anyone convicted of fraud since that date could face denaturalization under this law if it passes, even if the crime was decades ago and they already completed their sentence and rebuilt their life. Who could be affected? Potentially a lot of people. We're not just talking about huge multi-million-dollar schemes, although those are included. We're talking about any fraud conviction, smaller tax fraud, benefits fraud, lying on a loan application, and many other situations that can be charged as fraud under state or federal law. Under this bill, any of those could trigger automatic denaturalization, for naturalized citizens. Yes, the bill was prompted by a serious daycare fraud scandal involving large-scale abuse of government programs. Nobody is defending that conduct, but the proposed law goes far beyond that kind of extreme case. It sets up a broad mechanism where naturalized citizens could lose citizenship for offenses that, for people born in the U.S., would only result in criminal penalties, not loss of citizenship. Now let's look at why this bill faces huge constitutional problems. Two Supreme Court decisions are especially important: Afroyim v. Rusk, 1967, and Schneider v. Rusk, 1964. In Afroyim, the Supreme Court said Congress cannot take away a citizen's U.S. citizenship without that person's voluntary consent. The court treated citizenship as a constitutional right that Congress cannot just remove through legislation. The Fraud Accountability Act does exactly what Afroyim says Congress cannot do. It creates a legal process to strip citizenship against the will of the citizen, based on things that happened after naturalization. In Schneider, the court ruled that naturalized citizens and citizens by birth have the same constitutional rights, except that naturalized citizens can't be president. The court said you can't divide citizens into different classes with different levels of protection. This bill would do exactly that. A U.S.-born citizen who commits fraud could go to prison, pay fines, whatever the criminal court decides, but would keep their citizenship. A naturalized citizen who commits the same crime would lose theirs. That's the kind of unequal treatment Schneider directly rejects. People sometimes say naturalized citizenship has always been more vulnerable than birthright citizenship. That's only true in a narrow way, if there was fraud or illegality in getting citizenship in the first place. Once citizenship is properly granted, both groups are supposed to be on equal footing. This bill breaks that rule by making naturalized citizenship effectively conditional on future behavior. So, will this bill actually become law? My honest view is that it's very unlikely in its current form. And even if it did, I believe courts would block it quickly. Politically, many bills are introduced in Congress mainly to respond to headlines or send a message to voters. Most never move forward. A bill that dramatically changes the very nature of citizenship would need strong support in both the House and Senate, and then a president willing to sign it, despite very obvious constitutional issues. That kind of broad agreement is hard to imagine. Legally, the moment such a bill became law, civil rights groups would file lawsuits. With Afroyim and Schneider on the books, federal judges would likely issue temporary orders stopping the law from being enforced while the challenges move through the courts. In the end, the Supreme Court would either have to overturn its own past decisions or strike the law down. Practically, enforcing a law like this would be a nightmare. Judges would have to denaturalize people for even minor fraud offenses, with no chance to look at context. People with decades-old convictions who have lived as citizens for years could suddenly lose everything. The government would be trying to deport people to countries they barely remember. The human and logistical costs would be huge. Even so, this bill is part of a broader worrying trend, treating denaturalization like deportation and using immigration consequences as extra punishment for crimes by naturalized citizens. Immigration law is supposed to govern who can enter and stay in the U.S. as a non-citizen. It's civil law. Deportation is a civil consequence of not having valid status, not a criminal punishment. Citizens, by definition, have the right to live in their country. If we turn denaturalization into a standard punishment for crime, we're turning immigration law into an extra criminal penalty that only applies to naturalized citizens. That creates two categories of Americans with different levels of security in their citizenship, based purely on how they became citizens. If lawmakers think existing penalties for fraud are too light, they should increase them for everyone, natural-born and naturalized, rather than inventing a special, harsher rule for immigrants. So what should you actually take from all this if you're a naturalized citizen? First, don't panic about this specific bill. The chances of it becoming law are low, and even if it did, it would immediately face strong constitutional challenges. Second, stay informed about immigration and citizenship policy. Follow sources like this channel so you know about real changes that might affect you. Third, if you think there might have been any serious issue in your original naturalization application, it's wise to talk to an immigration attorney who has experience with denaturalization cases. Most people don't need to worry, but if you do have concerns, It's better to get professional advice. Fourth, remember that your voice counts. If this kind of legislation concerns you, contact your representatives and tell them why. Many members of Congress may not fully understand the deep consequences of the bills they're asked to support. Hearing from constituents can change how they view a proposal. The Fraud Accountability Act is a dramatic proposal that probably won't survive constitutional review, but it's part of a larger debate about citizenship, naturalization, and what it means to be American. These are important issues, and I'll keep following them for you. If you found this explanation helpful, please like this video and share it with others who might be worried about these questions. Leave your thoughts and questions in the comments. I read every comment and often make follow-up videos based on what you ask. Knowledge is power, especially in immigration matters. Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let fear make your decisions for you. Until next time, this is Entry Status USA, helping you navigate the complex world of American immigration.